Good morning. The U.S. seems to be moving towards a confrontation with North Korea. In the wake of that country's refusal to comply with nuclear inspections, officials are debating a number of diplomatic, economic, and military options. Emphasizing the seriousness of the crisis, NBC News has learned that a U.S. armada of at least 30 warships has moved into position within close range of the Korean coast. It's not yet a standoff, but the next move would seem to be up to North Korea today, Friday, March the 18th, 1994.
From NBC News, this is Today with Bryant Gumbel and Katie Couric.
Good morning. Welcome to Today on a Friday morning. Sarah James continues to join while Katie's on vacation. She'll be back on...
She'll be back on Monday.
On Monday, yes, indeed. We're going to talk about this growing problem, possibility of a confrontation with North Korea. We'll get the latest from the news desk in just a little bit. Then at 7:09, we'll be talking diplomatic and economic options with two powerful members of Congress. And at 8:09 this morning, we'll go to Moscow there to talk of military pressures that might be applied. Our guest will be Secretary of Defense William Perry. Sir?
Shades of the Cold War with the situation with North Korea. And speaking of the Cold War, it was back in 1961 when President Kennedy founded the Peace Corps. Now, many of the volunteers, 33 years later, who are in the Peace Corps are in former communist countries. We'll talk to Sergeant Shriver, who started the Peace Corps, and also to Carol Bellamy, the new head of it.
Some names this morning. We're going to talk about some telemarketing scams that are growing in popularity. Actor Peter Gallagher is going to be with us. We'll close out our series on raising kids in the 90s, too. Let's go to the news desk. Start there with Matt Lauer. Matt, good morning.
Good morning, Brian, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. It is no longer a question of whether the Senate will hold hearings on Whitewater, but a question of when. Lawmakers from both parties have now voted to hold hearings, and another presidential aide has been subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury. Jim Miklashevsky has the latest on that story live this morning from the White House. Mick, good morning.
Good morning, Matt. Despite the best efforts of the White House and congressional Democrats to contain it, the Whitewater investigation is growing in Congress and the courts. Thursday, the president's motorcade drove right past the federal courthouse where the Whitewater grand jury was in session. It's as close as President Clinton's been to the grand jury, but the investigation is getting closer to him. One of the president's top advisors, George Stephanopoulos, has now been subpoenaed to appear before the grand jury. NBC News has learned that Special Prosecutor Robert Fisk wants to question Stephanopoulos about phone conversations he had with Deputy Treasury Secretary Roger Altman concerning the Whitewater affair. Meanwhile, the Senate has moved closer to Whitewater hearings. The Senate voted 98-0 to consider a timetable for hearings. Senators agreed witnesses would not get immunity and that hearings should not interfere with the special counsel probe. Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell dropped his earlier opposition.
This is the responsible way to deal with this matter.
But Republican Bob Dole warned Democrats against using the talks as a stalling tactic.
And I would hope that I could get together with the majority leader next week. We may not be able to put it together, and if not, we'll be back on the floor.
White House officials tell us that despite his earlier opposition, President Clinton is now almost resigned to the idea of congressional hearings. But he wants the best possible timetable and terms. Matt?
Jim Miklashevsky this morning at the White House. President Clinton today is overseeing the signing of a newly negotiated peace agreement between Bosnia's Muslims and Croats. Serbs, who hold the greatest amount of Bosnian territory, are not part of this agreement. Bosnia's Muslim-led government today put the death toll from almost 2 years of civil war at more than 142,000. Meanwhile, concern is growing over North Korea's nuclear weapons program. CIA Director James Woolsey says 2 sophisticated missiles have been developed, and they could pose a threat to all of Eastern Asia and the Pacific. We have more from Ed Rabel.
One of the new missiles has a range of more than 2,100 miles. That means all of Southeast Asia and the Pacific could be at risk. So could Europe if the missile is exported to the Middle East. Meanwhile, NBC News has learned that those who inspected North Korea's nuclear sites last week feel certain that the communist state is continuing to build a nuclear arsenal, secretly manufacturing plutonium despite promises not to do so. Still, the Clinton administration is offering North Korea another chance, another opportunity to permit complete unhampered inspections. Some on Capitol Hill call it another opportunity to make a fool out of Uncle Sam.
If we continue concession after concession after concession to North Korea, then we eventually are going to end up in a crisis of much greater magnitude than the one we face today.
There are options. A Navy armada poised in the Pacific could be moved to the North Korean coast. Joint U.S.-South Korean military exercises aimed at North Korea could be ordered up. The UN might slap economic sanctions on the North, but as of now, that remains highly unlikely. And there's enormous uncertainty about whether any of the options would work. Ed Rabel, NBC News, the Pentagon.
3 weeks after the massacre at a West Bank mosque, the United Nations Security Council may vote today to condemn it. Diplomats hope the vote could help restart the Middle East peace process. An elderly patient has died in Southern California and could be considered another victim of January's destructive earthquake. Scientists are studying what they call valley fever, caused by a fungus shaken loose from the earth and propelled into the air by the quake itself. The Senate campaign of Oliver North is facing some fierce opposition from within his own party. We have details this morning from Joe Johns.
Former Marine Oliver North. He's at odds with his old boss, former President Ronald Reagan. Reagan wrote former Senator Paul Laxalt to say he was getting pretty steamed about statements coming from Oliver North. The former president went on to deny that he instructed North or anyone else to mislead Congress about the diversion of money from arms sales to Iran to fund the Nicaraguan Contra rebels in the mid-1980s. North said Reagan was misinformed.
People have flat out lied to President Reagan about what it is I have said and written. They did it in a desperate attempt to salvage a foundering political campaign.
There's a lot of politics here. Reagan wrote the letter to Laxalt, who supports Jim Miller, North's opponent. Some other Republicans, like Virginia Senator John Warner, want North out.
And I think that this man has any understanding or adherence to the oath of office he took of duty on our country. Now is the time for him to withdraw.
The nominating convention is in June. Joe Johns, NBC News, Washington.
That is the news at 7:06. It's time to go back over to Bryant, Sarah, and Al.
All right, thanks very much, Matt. Artistically, figuratively, literally, we are seeing less and less of you. We're glad of it. How you doing?
Good.
You're looking good.
Feeling good.
How many pounds now?
We're not even talking pounds.
Double digit.
We're just trying to get through life.
You look good.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And thanks to all the folks who have called. It's been very nice of you. Let's take a look. Winter's farewell, and it has been one to say bye-bye to here in the Northeast. Erie, Pennsylvania, 120 inches. Third snowiest ever. Bradley in Connecticut, 82 inches of snow, the second snowiest ever. Here in New York, with a couple more inches of snow today, 1 to 4, well, we could be in the top 10 as far as snowiest winters. Take a look at the radar. You can see we've got some activity heading our way. A little Alberta clipper going to bring us maybe 1 to 4 inches of snow here in the Northeast. But for the rest of the country, well, hey, springtime has already moved in. Spring arrives Sunday about 3:20 in the afternoon. Look for mild conditions in the midsection of the country. Sunshine, plenty of warm weather. Another system brings more wet weather, snowy weather in the Cascades in Washington. They have really been getting pounded this week. Some low-level clouds work their way into Los Angeles. Sunshine down in the southeast, also in Florida. Again, a little bit of a mess here in the Northeast with some snow back around the Great Lakes, some light snow, and some thunderstorms back through Kentucky, West Virginia, and on into the mid-Atlantic states. That's what's going on around the country. Here's what's happening in your neck of the woods. It's 7:08. Now here's Brian.
All right, Al, thanks very much. On Close-Up this morning, North Korea. As we've noted, there's a growing danger of confrontation with the government there of Kim Il-sung. His people have reneged on a promise to cooperate on nuclear inspections, and there's a great deal of uncertainty over what happens next. At our NBC News Bureau in Washington this morning are two men in a position to influence that next move. Lee Hamilton is chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and Arizona's John McCain sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Senator, let me start with you, if I might. The Senate yesterday approved an amendment that you initiated calling on the president to use strong measures to halt North Korea's nuclear weapons program. You've called for continuing support of joint exercises with South Korea, ensuring sufficient military forces, seeking international consensus, and sanctions on North Korea, and making it a priority. What effect do you really think any or all of that might have?
Well, Brian, it's not clear, but I know that to continue to make concessions is viewed by the North Koreans as signs of weaknesses. In fact, there has been no cooperation of any significance on the part of the North Koreans in compliance with a solemn treaty that they signed, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And I'd also like to mention that the cooperation of China is critical, as well as Japan, but especially China, if we expect to exercise leverage over the North Koreans. But have no doubt as to how dangerous this is. This morning's news indicates that the North Koreans have developed a new generation of ballistic missile, which increases the potential and the range of the... It's a very serious situation.
Before I move to Mr. Hamilton, you talk about the cooperation of China. Do you think we can count on them as an ally in this dispute?
I think we've got to convince China that it's in their interest not to see this kind of destabilization in the area. And also, I think that as opposed to putting all our emphasis on human rights, we should understand that the lives of 37,000 Americans in South Korea is now at least in some jeopardy.
Congressman Hamilton, as you see it, what are our practical options?
I think our course now has to be a two-track policy. The first track is to ratchet up that pressure on North Korea, as Senator McCain has indicated, deploy the missiles, resume the team spirit maneuvers, heighten the readiness of our troops there, and take other steps, including moving now to the United Nations to begin discussions of sanctions. While you do that, you have to follow a second track, and that second track is to keep the negotiating track open. That's very important. In the end, this is going to be solved by negotiations.
But let's be honest.
Both tracks are necessary.
But let's be honest about this. I mean, given the insular and defensive nature of Kim Il-sung's government, is any or all of that likely to have any effect whatsoever on a nation that has really taken great pride in being outside the sphere of global cooperation?
Well, we don't know for sure, but the pattern here has been that North Korea does eventually exceed if enough pressure is put on them. We can't be sure that that will happen again. All we can do now is ratchet that pressure up and at the same time keep open the opportunity for a negotiated solution. The preferred option here in terms of pressure is to go to the sanctions, but it makes a lot of difference how you get to those sanctions. We do not want North Korea to achieve one of its central objectives here, which is to drive a wedge between the United States on the one hand, Japan and South Korea on the other. So we have to proceed in concert and in close consultation with our allies. We also have to proceed carefully towards sanctions, taking into account China, because they could block them if they were so minded.
Senator McCain, we of course would like to see international action on this, but to your mind, is the threat sufficient that we should be prepared to move unilaterally if that's what it comes to?
I think we would have to, but recognizing, as you and Lee just said, that without the help of the Chinese and also the Japanese, because of the enormous amount of remittances, that are sent from Japan to North Korea, that it makes it exceedingly more difficult. But also, Brian, this administration's policy, in my view, can be characterized as walk softly and carry a bunch of carrots. We have got to make the North Koreans understand that we are very serious and we will take whatever steps necessary. And in an escalating mode, and very frankly, I'm deeply concerned about the consequences of continued concessions which the North Koreans simply don't respond to.
Let me move to Whitewater, if I might, gentlemen, in the minute or so we have left. Congressman Hamilton, now that we appear to be headed towards public hearings on Whitewater, how can you or anyone on the Hill stop this from becoming somewhat of a public circus with which Republicans might try to undermine the president?
Oh, I think we have to be careful to conduct whatever investigations go forward carefully. In close consultation with the special counsel. We don't want to impede the integrity of his action. We have a responsibility here to conduct hearings or any other fora that is used to get at the facts here carefully and deliberately. What I find among the people is mostly a kind of a confusion about Whitewater, and I think an in-depth process like congressional hearings can be helpful.
Senator, you have acknowledged that there's some degree of Republican partisanship in their calls for congressional hearings on Whitewater. As one who was charged in the Keating matter, is what the Clintons are going through an unfair part of political life?
I think that the politics is clearly a blood sport here.